The house was never meant for my brother, but he found out too late. Part 1. The day my brother threw me out of our childhood home, he smiled while carrying my suitcase to the front porch. "You have 1 hour," he said. "After that, I'll change the locks." I looked past him into the house where I had spent 28 years of my life. The same hallway, the same staircase, the same family photos. Except one picture was missing. A small framed photograph that had always hung beside the fireplace. I stared at the empty spot on the wall. My brother noticed. "What?" he laughed. "Looking for something?" I didn't answer, because that missing photograph meant only one thing. Someone had already found the secret hidden behind it. And if they had, my brother had just made the biggest mistake of his life. My name is Ethan. People always believed my younger brother Ryan was the favorite. They weren't wrong. When we were children, Ryan never heard the word no. If he wanted a new bicycle, he got it. If he broke mine, Dad bought him another one anyway. Whenever Ryan got into trouble, Mom somehow blamed me. "You're the older brother," she'd say. "You should have stopped him, even when I wasn't home." At first, I thought every family was like that. Then I grew older. I realized ours wasn't normal. Ryan learned that no matter what he did, someone else would clean up his mess, usually me. When I was 16, I worked after school to help pay our bills. Ryan spent his weekends racing dirt bikes with his friends. When Dad lost his job, I postponed college for a year. Ryan asked for a new truck. He got one. No one even asked how I felt. I simply became invisible. The only person who ever noticed was my grandfather, Grandpa Henry. He lived in a small cottage behind our house until he passed away. Everyone thought he spoiled me. The truth was much simpler. He treated me fairly. Sometimes, that feels like love when you've never experienced it before. Grandpa used to tell me strange stories about the house. "This place remembers everything," he'd whisper. I always laughed. He never did. One evening, just before I left for college, he handed me an old brass key. "Don't lose this." "What does it open?" I asked. "You'll know when the time comes." I kept it in my wallet for 12 years, never knowing why. 3 months before, everything fell apart. Dad died unexpectedly, a heart attack. The funeral was crowded. Everyone cried, even Ryan. Although I'd barely seen him visit Dad during the previous 2 years. The day after the funeral, Ryan moved into the house without asking anyone. "It's easier this way," he announced. "I'll take care of Mom." Within a week, he'd converted Dad's workshop into his personal gym. Within 2 weeks, he'd sold Dad's pickup truck. Within 3, he'd started talking about renovating the entire property. Mom never objected, neither did I. I didn't want another fight. Then the lawyer called. "There will be a reading of the will." Ryan wasn't worried. He walked into the office grinning. "I already know what Dad wanted." The lawyer looked uncomfortable. He read the will slowly. Most of Dad's savings were divided equally. Personal belongings were listed. Family jewelry, investments. Then came the house. Ryan leaned forward. "The family residence," the lawyer began. Ryan smiled. "Shall remain under the management of my wife until certain instructions left by my father are completed." Ryan frowned. "What instructions?" "I'm afraid I don't have them," the lawyer replied. "What do you mean you don't have them?" "There was a sealed letter." "Where is it?" "It disappeared." The room fell silent. Ryan laughed. "So who owns the house?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "At the moment, no one." Ryan hated uncertainty. He spent the next month convincing Mom that Dad had obviously intended the house for him. Eventually, she believed it. Then she convinced herself. One afternoon she called me. Ethan? I think it would be easier if Ryan stayed here permanently. I never argued. I know. But maybe you should find your own place. It wasn't really a request. So I packed my clothes, my books, Grandpa's old pocket watch, and left. Ryan stood in the doorway smiling. I'll send the rest later. He never did. As I drove away, I looked back once. The old oak tree in the backyard was swaying in the wind. Grandpa planted that tree. He always said, "The roots protect more than people realize." At the time, I thought he meant memories. I would soon discover. He meant something else entirely. 2 weeks later, I received a phone call from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly 15 years. Mrs. Eleanor Dawson, our elderly next-door neighbor. "Ethan, I need to see you. It can't wait." "What happened?" "It's about your grandfather." My heart skipped. He told me something before he died. Something I promised never to reveal. Unless Ryan ever forced you out of that house. I drove to Mrs. Dawson's house before sunrise. She was already waiting on her porch. In her hands was a weathered wooden box. "I've kept this for 12 years, she said quietly. "My grandfather gave it to you?" She nodded. "He knew your father would never have the courage to tell the truth." I stared at the box. It was locked. Mrs. Dawson looked at me. "Do you still have the brass key?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The key, the one Grandpa had given me before I left for college. I'd carried it in my wallet for over a decade without knowing why. With trembling hands, I slid it into the lock. It clicked instantly. Inside were 3 things: a faded photograph, an envelope sealed with dark red wax, and a folded map of our property. My grandfather's handwriting covered the edges. If you're reading this, Ryan has already claimed what was never his. My pulse raced. Mrs. Dawson looked away. I never read it. I promised. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. "Ethan, if this letter reaches you, then the family has repeated the same mistake they made years ago. They chose comfort over truth. The house was never meant to belong to the loudest son. It was meant to belong to the one willing to protect it." I frowned. Protect it? The next sentence chilled me. "There is something beneath this house that your father never wanted anyone to find." I looked up. "What does that mean?" Mrs. Dawson whispered. "Keep reading." The letter continued. "Years ago, your great-grandfather made a promise that every generation would hide one document inside the property. It proves who the legal owner of this land truly is. Land, not just the house. More than 20 acres surrounded the property. Today, it was worth millions." My hands began to shake. The folded map showed an old oak tree in the backyard. A red circle surrounded its roots. Below it, Grandpa had written only 4 words. "The truth sleeps here." Meanwhile, Ryan was celebrating. He had already hired contractors. Without waiting for probate to finish, he ordered them to remove the old oak tree. "It blocks the view," he complained. One worker hesitated. "Sir, this tree looks ancient." "I don't care." "Cut it down," chainsaws roared. The massive oak crashed to the ground before sunset. Ryan stood there smiling. He never noticed the small iron hatch buried beneath the roots. The workers covered it with dirt. No one mentioned it. That evening, I returned to the property. The backyard looked empty without the tree. I waited until every light inside the house went dark. Then I climbed over the fence. Using Grandpa's map, I found the disturbed soil within minutes. After nearly half an hour of digging, my shovel struck metal, the iron hatch, exactly where Grandpa said it would be. My heart pounded. The brass key fit again. Slowly, the hatch opened. Cold air rushed upward. Stone steps disappeared into darkness. Someone had built a hidden chamber beneath our backyard. I switched on my flashlight and climbed down. The room was surprisingly dry. Wooden shelves lined the walls, old ledgers, metal boxes, family journals dating back almost a century. Then my flashlight stopped on a single steel safe, bolted into the wall. Across its door was a brass plaque. To the rightful guardian of this home. Not owner, guardian. Before I could reach it, I heard footsteps above me. Someone was outside. I turned off my flashlight. The hatch creaked open. A beam of light swept across the room. Then I heard Ryan's voice. I knew someone was digging. He wasn't alone. He had brought 2 security guards, and they were coming down the stairs.